Hey, Andy.
And I'm bowing out, going back behind the curtain.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Um, Andrea, uh,
Yes.
so good to see you, woman.
So good to see you too.
I love that we've
And
gotten you
the other
as,
people I can't see, but I'm really glad you're here.
you know what I love. So for all of you guys, just so you guys know, my space in this design world is I get the fortunate opportunity to watch people evolve. Watching people evolve in their careers. And it has been an honor to watch you, Andre. Wait, you go by Andy, right?
Doesn't matter. I go by Andy in America because people have a hard time saying Andrea. So, but it doesn't
I
matter.
have to say
It
it with
doesn't
the,
matter.
with the accent.
Yeah.
Andrea. So I love that I got to see you and I love to see stars rise. And Andrea, you're someone that I just love your passion and what you're building. And I love that you're going to share with us your track and your history and what you've been doing and inspire so many in this design industry to pave their own path, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
You're
For those
welcome.
of you, I have two questions before I start. First one is my name showing like
Yes,
correctly?
yes.
Okay,
Andrea
because in my
Morales
screen it
Coto
looks like it's mirrored. But okay,
does.
cool.
Yep. No, you're good.
Okay, perfect. And the second thing is, I just wanted to say that the reason Angela is saying that she's seen me is actually my first job out of Parsons, where I came to do a master's with Angela. And then after that, I went into tech. So I worked at ThoughtWorks and then at Consensus, crypto startup, and then now I'm at MongoDB, a database solutions company.
Yes.
So
And I
yeah,
have to
amazing.
say, so many of our interns have gone to some of the most beautiful, amazing places. I mean, we know rising stars and how beautiful they are, right? And what you can do.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so that's the background. Oops, I just hit my computer there. All right, so let's get to it. I don't want to waste anyone's time. I will say at some point I might have to stop. I have allergies to my cats, so I have my hanky here. I might have to blow my nose, but you
Okay.
won't hear it because I will mute it. All right, let's go into the talk. So let me just go into. Oops, I can't see because of this. There we go. Into presentation mode. Um, So I'm very happy to be here. As I said before, my name is Andy Morales. My pronouns are she, her. There's also my Twitter handle there. If you want to follow me or know more about me, you don't have to follow me. But it's a good place to start. Someone mentioned LinkedIn. You can also go to my website from my Twitter, so it'll be pretty easy to reach out. As I said before, I have a background in design, of course, like everyone here. I work as a product designer now at MongoDB. I'm a lead product designer. Um, and actually, my background is not in design. I started in games design. I guess you could say that is design, but it's usually not as included, and in filmmaking. And I came to the United States, to New York in 2014 to do a master's program at Parsons. And you'll see that a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is reflected in my journey that has gone through from not being a designer to being a designer. And anyway, let's get right to it. The title of this talk is actually your title, as in your job title, won't matter. And it might sound a little bit ominous at the beginning, but hopefully we'll see a silver lining throughout the talk. So one of the first things I did when I was asked to speak at this conference was start by questioning what we meant by the theme, right? Like, what is design for disruption? And the way that I started doing it to find a way into my talk was to break down these three words and think about, okay, well, what could each one of those mean? What do we mean by design, right? There's always the questions, if you're on design Twitter, there's always these questions about, is everyone a designer? Does everyone deserve to be a designer? If not, why not? And what is design? Is design art, right? There's always these questions that we have to grapple with. Maybe not in our jobs, but as a profession, there's always a lot of talking about that. Other questions that are interesting in this theme, and this is where I started getting really excited, is the for. Okay, so if we are designing, whoever it is, are we designing for disruption in terms of in service of disrupting things, or to cause disruption, to avoid disruption, to lessen disruption, to respond to disruption. There's many ways that I could go about this topic. And the last question, of course, is when we talk about disruption, which is to bring something out of balance, right? To tear something apart. What are we disrupting? Of course, some could say we are being disrupted right now because of COVID, because of, you know, racial injustice. But what are we disrupting as designers? What paradigms are we seeking to change? And in the process of thinking about that, that's where I really found my grounding for this talk. So what I like about disruption as a word, and I want to go deeper into disruption, is that it implies time, right? It implies something that was normal, and then there was an event, and that event caused a change. And even though it sounds very of the moment, very momentary, disruption is always less sudden than it seems. And I think there are two examples here that I'd like to tackle. The first one being coronavirus in general, right? The first cases reported by China came in December, but actually recently, and by the way, these two things are linked. I can also link to my slides so that you can see the sources of these two images. But in France, the first known case was actually in December, and this was found out in May. So that means that we actually don't know where this virus started. We also don't know how fast it traveled, and we don't know when it started. There's a high chance that this started months before December. So it's not like coronavirus came and it happened quickly, right? Something was brewing for years. And on the other hand, you have another disruption that is coming, which is climate change, right, and global warming. And I got really interested in, we all know how global warming is something that, you know, when you look back even into the 1900s, the 1800s, you can see how the planet has warmed as the industrial age started. But I was interested in looking into when scientists started noticing this. And there was a period of time not too long ago in the 60s where scientists were going between it's going to be cooling versus warming, and there were talks about ice ages. But overall, since I would say around the 1970 year here, there has been consensus, right, that global warming is a thing that's going to happen. And so we've had a good 50 years to think about this, and yet here we still are, right? And we know that we're being disrupted by this. We know that this is the hottest year on record. It's not that it came out of anywhere. So there's something really interesting about how disruption, actually, when you think about it, it feels sudden, but it should push us to look back and to look forward. There's always a sense of time in disruption. And that disruption, that whole looking back and forward, what we notice pretty quickly is that disruption is always driven by humans. If you start thinking about disruption less as a thing that happens to us, you'll realize that all the changes that we're living now, all the protests, all the coronavirus, climate warming, this is happening, has been predicted. Humans have been fighting for this for years, right? Racial injustices have been happening for years. And this is all led by humans. Another example that I like to say is when you think about the shift that happened, I would say like in the past 10 years, when the majority of the United States started backing gay rights, that's not something that happened out of nowhere. There is a tipping point in most of these disruptions, but this started with trans Black women at Stonewall 50 years ago, right? Well, 51 this year. And so the fact that these protests are happening is also not just, you know, this happened all of a sudden. We just had the right situation and then something tipped over. So in that sense, no disaster is a natural disaster, right? Every disaster is man-made. The reason coronavirus is affecting mostly Black and Latino populations is because of unequal access to healthcare. It's because of inequality. It's because of income inequality, and that's what I meant. And overall, we have to start thinking about the role that each of us has in responding to disruption or in creating disruption, because we might be creating disruption right now, even by not acting. So I'm gonna start bringing this all back to your title will matter, and you'll see how this ties perfectly into each other. But I really wanted to start with disruption and then bring it back to the individual. So I'm gonna give you an anecdote from September 7, 2016. One day after my birthday. I had just graduated that year from Parsons. I was very afraid. I didn't know what was going to happen in the future because I'm an immigrant too. And we all get invited, me and my cohort of grad students in that moment, I guess alumni, we get invited to have dinner together at a friend's house. And we invite some of our teachers, some of our professors. And this professor, he's very well known. He works in speculative design in New York City. He says, I want you to imagine what you'll be doing in 2050 and tell me what you think you'll be doing. Right? And of course, that makes a lot of sense. I don't know how much you know about speculative design, but they're all about thinking about the future through this thing called the possibility cone, where you have the present and then you have kind of like a multiverse of futures that could happen. You have what's possible, which could even be aliens abduct us all, right? What's plausible, what's probable, meaning what's probably going to happen due to current circumstances. And then speculative design always likes to think about what's preferable. And he asked us this question, and he got a bunch of different answers. He got answers like, oh, I want to be a design director doing the best projects of my life. Someone else I remember was like, oh, I want to head my own firm. I want to live in New York City and maybe have like my brownstone, right? Like big dreams, 'cause that's expensive in New York City. I want to have a family. I want to work from home more. I want to have my own team. I want to live in my dream city, remake St. Louis into a big metropolitan city and do my dream job there. And then they turned to me and they said, what about you, Andy? What do you want to be doing in 2050? What do you picture yourself doing? And my reaction was complete cringe and distress, because as I've told you before, I had been thinking about these big systemic problems, and I didn't have a lot of hope. And so looking at this cone of possibilities, I remember in the moment kind of thinking like, okay, well, what is the possible? It could go anywhere from a complete climate apocalypse to a complete solar powered utopia. What is the plausible? Probably many people will die and only the powerful will survive. What is probable? Meaning what's likely going to happen? It's that humans adapt and readapt, but some people still die in the way. And then what's preferable would be that we adapt in an egalitarian way. There's probably still going to be death and inequality, but we adapt slowly. So maybe not in time. So my mind went into this, right, which is not a very happy place, none of these except the utopia. And so going back to the how about you, Andy, my answer was not particularly cheerful. I said, well, I don't think anyone will care what I'm doing in 2050. Maybe I'll be in Iceland or Alaska if I'm still alive, although Alaska's not a good idea because of the permafrost melting. By the way, it's very pessimistic right now. It'll get better. And I was like, maybe I'll have to run away. Maybe no one, there won't be designers. What kind of question is that? For 2050, I don't think design matters that much in the context of 2050. I think we'll have bigger problems. And overall, I just felt like what I wanted to do was lie down, try not to cry, and cry a lot. Basically, my answer was a complete mood killer. Everyone just went really quiet. And, you know, it was like, well, anyway, let's change topics. And that was the end of that question. Flash forward to 2020, again, because we have to look back and look forward when we think about disruption. And I would say probably my answers are still the same. But I think now, and this is what I want to talk about, I think now it's a good thing. I've started framing that shift into, you know, my title won't matter, it just doesn't really matter, into a good thing. I think before I was a little bit more nihilistic, and now I realize that there's a space for me to act, and that's what design should be doing. So no one will care what my title will be. It doesn't matter if I'm a designer, if I'm a lead designer, if I'm a director of design, if I'm an, you know, chief design officer. That probably won't matter by 2050, but that's actually kind of exciting, right? There's a space there to think about how are careers and jobs and community going to exist in 2050. In terms of maybe I'll have to run away to Iceland, I still don't know. Iceland probably won't take me, but I've been thinking about other things like Maine and Canada, and I think there's some really interesting possibilities there, so I'm not as scared anymore. And third, will design even exist? And this is where I kind of shrug. Does it matter in a way, or does it matter more what design has taught us and what we can design to others? So I guess the main reason these questions are not stressing me out as much anymore is because personally, I enjoy the idea of an egalitarian utopia. A lot of what speculative design does, for those of you that don't know, is kind of think about these worst case scenarios. It's always very like, very somber, right? And it's always kind of like a warning. They make objects that tell us what this dystopia would look like in a very probable way so that we react to it. But I never quite jive with that idea. And even though certainly I was pessimistic 4 years ago, I realized that I'm a person that likes the idea of a utopia. I want to keep fighting for that utopia. And so these questions that seemed scary before don't seem so scary anymore because I can make the choice to be optimistic about it. Of course, it's not that simple. It's not just change your mood. I'm going to talk about that in a sec. So in a way, I've changed. I think before I would make all these scenarios in my head, which all came from learning design, right? And the latest practices in design. And now I've decided that I want to have both. I want to work on a preferable present that works towards a possible preferable future. And I think that is doable through design. I want to work towards that ideal future by using the best pieces of collaborative design and community ideation and being of service to others in a subpar, because let's be honest, this is subpar, present. And I think the way to do that is both, like I said, relying on others and relying on yourself. And design has provided me personally, as a person that didn't come from design, the tools to do that, right? To, in this world of disruption, prepare myself and others better for it. So in this utopia that I'm thinking of, I don't really care if designers are called designers or not. I just need two things, like I said before. I need a resilient community, which can be many different things for many different people. It can be from your family, but hopefully a little bit bigger than that. And the tools to adapt to that disruption, right? The tools to adapt to the long-term coming disruption that would be that utopia. Whatever it is, we need to define it first as a community, and then we need the tools to adapt our present to it. In 2050, I could be a fisherwoman. I could be some sort of weird new position called community protector. I could be whatever the communities are going to need, because again, all I will need is not my title as a designer, but I will need a resilient community and the tools to adapt. And the more I start thinking about it that way now, the less stress I'm going to feel too about what my career is going to be and how I'm progressing in my career, etc. Because it's not going to be so much about my title. It's going to be more about what I'm building towards. So the way to start planning for disruption is by letting go of the concept of what your career will be. And by that, I don't mean don't plan or don't have bigger ambitions, but rather let go a little bit of the constraints of where you think things will go, because high chances in the next couple of decades, we don't know how things are going to go. You can have plan A, B, C, D, E. I do that a lot. I always have like 40 different plans in my head. But to be honest, we just don't know, right? And so it's best if we use the tools that design gave us for the unknown. So focus on what design has given you, and hone those skills in service of forming a resilient community. And here are some of those skills that design has given us. Empathy, and I write ish because we can't fully empathize with people that are not our race or our socioeconomic class or our culture, but we can try. And that's something that design has given us, right? I think many times in design, we fall into the trap of saying, I can fully empathize. That's not true. But just the idea that we have to empathize is a great first step. And this is a big thing that design has given, not only to us, but also to people in business, right? Now they talk about empathy with the user. Well, it's a step. Think about systems thinking. This is something that all designers do, whether they know it or not, right? They think about potential consequences. They think about the different pieces of a service. They think about how the components work together. They think very holistically. Engineers do that too, but they break down the big into small. We usually try to build from small into big, but not by pieces, right? We work more in connections, in flows, and that's going to be really important in a world where things are changing every day, right? Like, is COVID, safe to be inside or outside? Why were the protests not leading to peaks of COVID? And already I know this because I talked to other designers. They're in their heads, they're coming up with potential conclusions, and we're not scientists, we shouldn't make the final one. But that's systems thinking, right? We're thinking about this constantly and thinking about it in a human way. The ability to zoom in and zoom out, the ability to look at the smallest problem and then relate it to the big picture, and the ability to make things with your hands, which not all designers have, but the ability of creation is something that, this is why design thinking exists. It's really difficult for people to believe that they can create. So we can create. And many of us at a certain point in our career even lose kind of like our uncertainties or our self-doubt about it. That's huge in a world that's going to have so much uncertainty that people are not going to know what to create. To be able to do that, to make things out of nowhere, is going to be a huge skill. And we also need to learn other skills that design can't give us by default. I don't know how to grow food. We should probably learn how to grow food, right? I don't know that much about community leadership. Yes, I've facilitated workshops. I've worked in social justice. I'm still not a community leader. It's very different when you see people trusting their community leaders. We need to learn more about that. We need to learn that not everything can be facilitated, that sometimes there are conflicts that can be facilitated in a design thinking workshop, and that's okay, right? There are other people with other skills that are going to come in and do that better than us. Which leads me to, we need to learn humility. Go to a first aid class, go to a mental first aid class. New York City is giving those for those that live in New York. Learn how to take care of others physically as well as mentally. And also sometimes just being quiet. sometimes. Some designers are better at this than me. I am very extroverted, but I think design is very much made for extroverts in some ways, right? You're supposed to be facilitating, you're supposed to be standing up, you're supposed to be talking to the C-suite about the value of what you're doing, and reacting on your feet. That's great, but also sometimes from here to 2050, we're just gonna need to be quiet. And I think the protests have been a good moment for a lot of people to realize, I need to be quiet and let others talk. So these are the kind of skills that, again, your title won't matter in the context of them, right? Can you lead a community? Can you be humble? Do you know first aid? Do you know how to grow food? Do you know how to be quiet and listen at the right time? That doesn't come by default with a title. And that's going to be really important. Overall, I think what I'm trying to say is, in the context of your title won't matter, you have to be of service to others. And this was said to me actually by a boss of mine, the lead of the Office of Social Justice at ThoughtWorks when I worked for her. And it really changed the way I look at my work. It's really difficult, particularly if the others are bullying you or disempowering you. And I think I wouldn't say that in those cases you have to be of service to others, but to the degree that you can, think about your profession as just being of service to others. You were taught a set of skills. They're great. Design skills are very unique and necessary, but they are useful so long as they're of service to others, particularly in the upcoming decades. So, like I said, your title definitely won't matter. I really don't think it will. And there's freedom in that. There's freedom for you to rethink who you're going to be in this world. There's freedom for you to think about what you want to do now, which can be design hell. I'm a lead designer, at a tech company. It's that where I see myself by 2050. Who knows? Maybe I need to change. Maybe I need to shift. Am I being of enough service to others? What are my priorities? But I don't have to think about it as, am I going to be the chief design officer one day? I could if I want to, but high chances that's not going to be important. Or at least it shouldn't, because we're going to have bigger problems. And so if you grow to that position, let it be something that is not weighing down on you. Like, to be honest, it was at some point in my career, and it usually is when I'm talking to junior designers. That's the kind of weight they feel. Right. And they are Gen Z. They are the new generations that's coming up is feeling like they're going to have the same steps that some of us and people that are older than me, I'm 30, have had. But truth of the matter is it's not going to be that way for them. So we also have to let go of that concept so that they can grow, right? And redefine what design's role is going to be in the industry, but in general in the world. And that's exciting. We should be excited about the possibility of opening these opportunities for us, for younger people that are going to have a completely different world. We should not model a straight career ladder for them completely. They should work on what they can in this present because they deserve the best. I think designers are amazing. But that pressure, it's just not going to be that important. It definitely is not going to be. So I'm just going to finish by looking back at my first slide, which was design for disruption. And this is by no means what every speaker is going to be defining disruption or design or the four as. But I think overall, my conclusions here are that I think in terms of who designs, it will be everyone, which, by the way, I didn't used to feel this way. I didn't like it when people would say everyone's a designer. But now I think everyone should be if you teach them, right? Why not? Why not teach those valuable skills that design gave us, that give us resiliency and, a way of thinking about the big and the small at the same time? That's my cat, sorry. Why not teach it to them? In terms of what is design, we can go back and forth around that and talk about that for days, but who cares what design is if you're not giving it to others? In terms of the 4, who should it be in service of? Others. What should it cause or go after? Utopias. What should it avoid? Dystopias, 100%. What should it lessen? Pain. And I don't mean customer pain. I mean pain in general. And what should it respond to? And this is the hardest one because I think I don't live by this one fully, but I think it should be injustice. If we are designers with the capital D, we should be responding to injustice, even in the smallest things that we do at our work, because all of us are trying to survive right now. You know, it's not the time to not have a job. Those of us, I have my job right now, but those that don't have a job right now would do anything to have one. So I'm not saying quit your job immediately. It's not that simple, but I think it's important to keep that in mind, right? This is what we should be working on. Disrupting what? I actually think ourselves and the bigger paradigms of injustice, inequality, and the inevitability of climate collapse. Why can't we disrupt that idea? Why can't we help people dream big with the things that we can create out of nowhere? And I think that would be my definition of design for disruption, of this theme, of this topic for the conference. And I'm really excited to go there and to start seeing disruption in this way. So yeah, that's it for me. We have 15 minutes for Q&A, and I'm just really excited to hear from all of you. Hopefully this talk made sense. Yeah.
Hello, Andy.
Hi.
Well, thank you very much. I just want to say some of your graphics were absolutely fabulous. I could totally relate to Lucille Ball at that one point. Like, ooh, I don't know where I see myself in 2050. Like, yep. Hopefully retired, but you never know in life.
Is retirement gonna exist? What about, there's so many questions. Like 401ks, no one has retired on a 401k yet. I don't know if you knew that, because I found out about that recently, that 401ks were invented 30 years ago or less than that. And so no one has technically retired on a 401k. I know, it's terrifying. I'm sorry. It's terrifying.
I gotta get ready. Okay, so, well, thank you again. And I do have a couple of questions. You say that titles don't matter, but certainly affect our pay grade, which is a source of contention for diverse designers. Could you explain that tension?
Yeah, I've actually spoken about this with junior designers a lot. I think there is a tension right now, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that tension should be solved now, meaning I want equality amongst women and men and amongst all races when it comes to pay. And I think we should fight for that now. Sure. But what I'm saying is, in the future, that won't matter. Like I said before, you have to think about the ideal future and then work in the present. In the present, to make that not matter even more, you have to work for that equality, right? So it's less saying because it won't matter in the future, it doesn't matter now. It's more saying, if it's not going to matter in the future, well, how do we set up these people that are going to be the best designers to thrive now? And I say this a lot of, so Gen Z, and I'm a millennial, but I feel like Gen Z is coming up. There's several junior designers at my company that are just like consistently sad that they're not doing more and that they're making ridiculous amounts of money for someone that's 23, right? And they're making like 80K and living in New York City. And they've been asking me like, should I quit? I don't know what to do. And as far as I can get to right now, and I don't know if this is the best answer, but from my point of view, I want these people to have access to the resources that will allow them to become better people for the future. Mm-hmm. The trick always is, when do you lose that social consciousness, right? Because I look at my parents owe everything to the welfare state in Costa Rica. Mm-hmm. And now they just believe that they did everything on their own, that they earned everything, and that they don't know anything to anyone, right? So do we all lose that? I think we have to start now by giving the young people that are diverse, access to that equality. And then we have to build the steps to keep being socially conscious from here until 2050. I hope that made sense, but what I'm saying is it matters. There is a tension. We need to work on it now, but I don't think in the future it'll be that way.
I mean, fascinating. If we can definitely get in terms of the pay aspect on the same page, that definitely will help eliminate that title aspect and wanting to feel like, oh, I need to reach this title to get this type of pay grade to feel like I can live this type of lifestyle. So that's very interesting.
And also I was going to say, after a certain point, I've talked about this a lot, I don't need more money. But that's difficult, right? Because like not everyone's going to feel that way, but you truly don't. Allegedly, after 70K, you pretty much feel the same, unless of course you're like inundated with debt, which is what happens now, where you're like, I need to pay this as quickly as possible, which is why you want a higher salary. And that's a whole, that's also a part of this discussion. But I don't think after a certain amount of money you're really needing it.
How can you be so sure that titles won't matter in the future? I mean, because I love my title and I'm aiming for bigger and better in my own personal future, but how do you know it won't matter?
I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I think it won't, from the point of view of looking at how humanity has shifted power and the concept of labor during big crisis times.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it will matter that much. I think what will matter is seniority from the point of view of how much do you know about a topic, and can the community agree that you're the person that knows that, right? So, for example, if you look at scientists, and I personally like learning a lot about Chernobyl, or let me rephrase that. I like knowing about moments in which humanity has come together in really odd ways, where you're like, how did everyone cooperate, right? Chernobyl is a moment like that, where I think there was a lot of, well, these are our smartest scientists, and these are our smartest people, so we're going to put them there. But I don't think it necessarily had to do with, this person's the head of Harvard. It might, right? Because technically that's how titles work now, but I don't see in a moment of crisis people going, wait, where did you graduate from? How much money are you making? Okay, yes, I will give you this title. Now you can go save us all. I think there's going to be more of a, you've done it before, we've seen you do it, we trust you, go get it, right? And so that's why I'm saying that. But I could be wrong. There might be different titles. But yeah, we'll see. It also depends on how much corporate America and the world continues being the same. I think that will be hard, but it is a big beast, so it might still exist. If it's my utopia, there's going to be more community based work, because we're not going to have any other possibilities.
Sure.
Right? I was also going to say, last thing, I'm sorry. If you look at what happened with COVID and how essential workers were the one that continued having jobs that were really dangerous, I think that was a very sobering moment where I realized, I'm a designer and I'm working from home on like a database company, but how important is my job in the context of everything that's happening?
Sure.
Right? I'm not sweeping the streets.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us felt guilt about that. And it's good guilt from the point of view of it leads you to think about what you're doing in this world and say, maybe we should pay street sweepers better, right? Because they are actually keeping hygiene and helping all of us. And maybe we should pay nurses more, right? It's just been a moment of contending with ourselves. And that's why I think titles won't matter as much, at least in design.
You mentioned something in your presentation about non-design skills. And I think that is very interesting in terms of not just the relevance of design and being in the design industry, but just as humans in the way that we work in the design field, right? Like, so we go to school and we study in a particular area, but at the same time, it's good to have these non-traditional design skills because we continue to learn and build, and that can impact as people, to your point of, wow, okay, I can take this skill and bring it into there and teach other people. So that's very interesting. How does your talk dovetail into the discussion around design founders?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. I think there have been a couple of design founders that have been glorified, mostly in tech, and they have actually designed companies that have ended up not having the systems thinking aspect to it. So I think, I mean, and I'm not critiquing, this is always hard, right? Because like companies are big and you don't know the context of everything. But I think Airbnb is a really interesting case where there were unexpected consequences because of a lack of diversity at the top that led to Airbnb being a big cause of gentrification. And I guess what I'm trying to say with this is I still think that even though designers can and probably will more and more so become founders because we can create in other ways that people are chastised for since they're kids, right? They're not meant to do more creative stuff after a certain point. You're an accountant and that's it, and you're not supposed to be creative. Designers have the possibility of keeping creating, but I think if that is not being done towards, like I said, that utopia and towards rethinking reality as it is, we're just going to fall into the same problems. So I guess what I'm trying to say is please more design founders, please more conscious design founders. And in that case, then again, your title won't matter. So that's cool. It won't matter if you're a design director. What will matter is that you founded something and you made it with people, right? So it kind of fits perfectly into my theory.
Fabulous. We have 4 more minutes, and I wanted to just open up to the attendees. If anybody could raise their hand if they have a question for Andy, please so. If not, I do have another question, and I'll quickly ask it as those might be raising their hand in the background. Why Iceland?
Wait, sorry, Zoe. We have Steph B who just raised her hand.
Oh, please go ahead.
Steph, I'm gonna. Steph, you're on.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Happy Thursday.
Good morning.
Hi.
In terms of the why Iceland, I know that Andy's going to answer it, but I just have to chime in really quickly. I've had this theme in my head for a long time, years now. And with COVID, I've been wanting to create a resilient community around the concept of Finland now. And when you look at what they have done socially, politically, economically, and how capitalism can be a social good, Finland now. Look it up, but I'll let Andy talk on that. My question.
Okay. That sounds great. I'll look it up.
Thank you. My question,
sorry,
I don't want to take up too much time, was what are some of your favorite paths of experience to share design skills or help upskill our resilient communities who aren't design educated? So you mentioned.
Sorry, go on.
And thank you in advance.
I'm sorry I interrupted you so many times. I think there's a little bit of lag, and so I would hear you going out and going in. I'm sorry about that.
Were you able to hear the question?
Yes, you said, what are like my favorite experiences or ways of including the community in learning design? Is that correct? I probably didn't say it as right.
That's the gist of it. Yeah. How do you share that skill set with those who aren't design trained and expand, the capacity of your community, I guess?
I feel like I need to get better at it. I think I've done it so far through like participatory design techniques, which also comes from Nordic countries. And by the way, Nordic countries have their own problems, mostly surrounding racism. But I will say, I was like, there's no place, right? It's like, come on, everybody has to have a problem. So far I've been doing like a lot of, when you do workshops with people, when you have them facilitate the workshop, maybe you facilitate the first time, but then you let them facilitate, and it's okay if they make mistakes. They usually do better than you because they know their community better than you. And it's a big moment of humility. I've also done a lot of, when it comes to game design, again, teaching game design, one way that I've done it is by making concepts that are really difficult to grasp, even for me. So that's the important part, even for me. Not that I think they're difficult for people, but that are difficult in general. So for example, I've worked a lot in making finance easier to design for. And by this, I mean, can we design new ways of money, or can we design new ways for community funds to exist? This kind of thinking. What I do is I give them, I make everything into a game. I think because I'm a game designer. So I give them rules of a game, and then I let them do whatever they want with it. And I actually enjoy it when people cheat in the games I'm creating, because that's usually when people are being creative and are going beyond what I designed for. So I can give more explanation that I have. I'll put it in the chat. I have a Medium article about a game that I made where I gave people a certain set of rules and they had to create a new economy, and many of them started cheating and going around it. And I was like, perfect, that's what I want. I don't want you to do what I said you should do whatever you want. And they came up with better ideas than I even had. And I consider that design, because then some of them were like, oh, can I do this with my friends? And I was like, yeah, I mean, why not? Right? I didn't make it for me to be the only facilitator. But I feel like I still got to think more about it. But that's as far as I've gotten.
Well, thank you so much, Andy. This has been our time for this section, and I truly appreciate your time, and Stephanie, your question as well. In between the time, Kelly is going to put up the agenda, so I just wanted to give everybody a heads up that there will be a little agenda posted. Again, Andy, thank you so much for your time today. It was very riveting. Thank you again.